How to end it with a girl who has nothing going for her and will become homeless. I was 20 years old when I first met her, a girl whose presence would alter the course of my life in ways I could never have predicted. I was attending a community college, a decision born out of practicality rather than necessity. Coming from a middle-class family, I was determined to save money while pursuing my education. I wasn't the kind of guy who could afford to take on massive student loans, and I was resolute in finding the most affordable path to a degree. She was 22, a year older than me, yet somehow seemed much younger in spirit. She had a certain innocence about her, a vulnerability that was both endearing and concerning. She didn't come from a place of comfort or security like I did. Instead, her life had been a series of struggles, each one harder than the last. She was attending community college not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. Her parents had given her an ultimatum: either go to school or get out of their house. With no real options, she chose the former, though her heart was never in it. Our initial interactions were casual, nothing out of the ordinary. We sat next to each other in class, exchanged pleasantries, and sometimes shared notes. But there was something about her that drew me in, a quiet sadness that I couldn't ignore. Over time, our conversations grew longer, more personal. I learned about her strained relationship with her parents, her struggles with money, and the immense pressure she felt to succeed despite having no real direction in life. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but as the weeks passed, I found myself wanting to spend more time with her. We started hanging out outside of class, grabbing coffee or studying together at the library. It was during one of these study sessions that she broke down, revealing just how dire her situation was. Her parents were threatening to kick her out, and she had no idea where she would go or what she would do. Without thinking, I offered her a place to stay. It wasn't a grand gesture. I had a small apartment close to campus, and I figured it would only be temporary. She hesitated at first, but with no other options, she eventually agreed. And just like that, we went from classmates to roommates, and soon after, to something more. Our relationship developed quickly after she moved in. At first, it was simply convenient. She needed a place to stay, and I needed help with the rent. But living together brought us closer, and soon, the lines between convenience and affection began to blur. We spent most of our time together, and before long, we were a couple in every sense of the word. She was sweet, caring, and always tried to make me laugh, even on my worst days. Despite her circumstances, she had a resilience that I admired. She would talk about her dreams, even though they were vague and ever-changing. One day, she wanted to be a writer, the next, a photographer. But those dreams never materialized into anything concrete. They were just that, dreams. As for me, I continued my studies with a clear goal in mind. I knew what I wanted: to graduate, get a good job, and build a stable life. She, on the other hand, was still lost, and that difference between us became more apparent as time went on. Despite my efforts to encourage her, she struggled to find her footing. She dropped out of school after a year, deciding that it wasn't for her. Her parents, true to their word, cut her off completely. She had no family, no job, and no real plan for the future. But we made it work, or at least we tried to. I graduated and started working as a nurse at a local hospital, earning a decent salary for someone my age. We weren't living luxuriously, but we were comfortable. Yet, despite the financial stability I provided, there was always a tension between us. She refused to work, preferring to spend her days at home, lost in the digital world of Instagram and TikTok. I tried to be patient, hoping that she would eventually find something that inspired her, but as the months turned into years, my patience began to wear thin. The turning point came gradually, like a slow burn that you don't notice until it's too late. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment I started losing feelings for her, but it was inevitable given the circumstances. The more I interacted with my coworkers, women who were driven, ambitious, and full of life, the more I realized how stagnant our relationship had become. I was surrounded by people who had passions, goals, and hobbies, while she seemed content to drift through life without any of those things. It wasn't just that she didn't work. It was everything. the refusal to cook, the constant desire to eat out, the never-ending stream of online purchases that drained our bank account. She was chronically online, spending hours scrolling through social media while the world passed her by. Our conversations became shallow, revolving around the latest trends on Instagram rather than anything meaningful. And our once active sex life became just another routine, devoid of the passion it once had. I tried to talk to her about it, gently at first. I suggested that she find a hobby, something to occupy her time that didn't involve her phone. I even offered to help her go back to school, promising to cover the costs if she found something she was passionate about. But every time, she would either brush off my suggestions or make half-hearted attempts that fizzled out after a few days. It was like she didn't care, or worse, like she didn't believe she could ever change. The resentment built slowly, day by day, until I could hardly stand to be around her. But even then, I didn't want to hurt her. I knew that without me, she had nothing, no job, no friends, no family to fall back on. The thought of leaving her filled me with guilt, but staying with her felt like I was suffocating. I was trapped, and I didn't know how to escape. One night, after a particularly grueling shift at the hospital, I came home to find her lying on the couch, scrolling through her phone as usual. I don't know what it was about that moment, but something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, that I was happy in this relationship when I wasn't. Instead of getting ready for bed, I stood in the living room, staring at her. She looked up, confused by my silence, but still smiling, as if nothing was wrong. When I told her we needed to talk, her smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. But she didn't take me seriously at first, thinking it was just another one of our minor disagreements. As I began to speak, laying out all the frustrations and disappointments that had built up over the years, she finally understood the seriousness of the situation. She listened quietly, her expression growing more somber with each word. I told her that I was tired of waiting for her to find direction, tired of feeling like I was the only one putting effort into our lives. I told her that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. She didn't argue or try to defend herself. Instead, she agreed with everything I said, as if she had been expecting this conversation all along. She promised to change, to get a job, go back to school, and even listed off places she could apply to and courses that interested her. For a moment, I almost believed her, but deep down, I knew that it was too late. The damage was done. Then came the hardest part. I told her that I didn't love her anymore, or at least not in the way I used to. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and she broke down, crying and pleading with me to give her another chance. She asked why I hadn't told her sooner that I was losing interest, and I explained that I had tried, in my own way, by encouraging her to make changes in her life. But she hadn't listened, and now it was too late. Her tears and apologies didn't move me. I felt nothing but discomfort, like I was watching a stranger break down in front of me. She begged me to give her 2 months to prove that she could change, to show me that she could be the girlfriend I needed. I reluctantly agreed, not because I believed she would change, but because I didn't want to make her homeless. I told her that if she didn't show any improvement in a month, I was done. The next few weeks were a strange mix of hope and despair. She made an effort, she really did. She started cooking again, trying out new recipes and even planning out meals for the week. She got a part-time job at a local cafe, which seemed to give her a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. She also started taking photography seriously, spending hours researching techniques and practicing with her camera. It was like she was trying to become the person she thought I wanted her to be. But despite these changes, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too little, too late. The resentment I had built up over the years didn't just disappear overnight. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of all the times she had ignored my pleas for her to do something with her life. And now that she was finally making an effort, I couldn't bring myself to care. We had another conversation about a month into her transformation. This time, it was her who initiated it. She asked me if I had noticed the changes she was making, if I thought there was still a chance for us. I wanted to give her the answer she was hoping for, but I couldn't lie to her. "I've noticed," I said, choosing my words carefully. But I don't think it's enough. I appreciate everything you're doing, but the truth is, I still feel the same way. I'm not sure that's going to change." She looked devastated, but she didn't cry this time. Instead, she nodded, as if she had been expecting this answer all along. "So, what now? Do we just end things?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "I think it's the best thing for both of us. You deserve to be with someone who loves you fully, someone who appreciates all these efforts you're making. And I need to find that for myself too." The days that followed were filled with an unbearable tension. We both knew it was over, but we didn't quite know how to disentangle our lives from each other. She suggested that she should be the one to move out, that it would be easier for me to stay since I was the one paying the rent. She had some savings from the job and planned to crash at a friend's place until she found something more permanent. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution we could come up with. The day she moved out was gray and overcast, matching the mood inside our apartment. She packed her belongings quietly, not saying much as she moved from room to room. I offered to help, but she declined, saying she needed to do this on her own. There was a finality to it, a sense that this was the last chapter of our relationship. When everything was packed, and the boxes were loaded into her friend's car, she turned to me one last time. There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I'm sorry it ended this way," she said softly. "I wish I could have been better for you." I wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the pain, but all I could manage was a weak, "I'm sorry too." She nodded, then turned and walked out the door, leaving behind an empty apartment and an even emptier feeling in my chest. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the door as if expecting her to come back. But she didn't, and I knew she never would. In the weeks that followed, I adjusted to my new life alone. At first, the silence was deafening. I'd come home from work to an empty apartment, no sounds of cooking or mindless TV shows playing in the background. The space that once felt cramped now felt vast and hollow, echoing with the absence of her presence. But slowly, I began to fill the silence with my own interests. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra shifts at the hospital to keep myself busy. I also started reconnecting with old friends, people I had lost touch with during the relationship. It was strange at first, trying to find my footing in a life that no longer revolved around her, but it was also liberating. I began to explore hobbies I had neglected over the years. I joined a local hiking group, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. I picked up reading again, devouring books that had been gathering dust on my shelf. And I started cooking for myself, discovering a love for trying new recipes and experimenting in the kitchen. Despite the newfound sense of freedom, there was still a lingering sadness that I couldn't shake. I missed her, not in the way I had expected, but in the sense that I missed the comfort of having someone around. I missed the routine, the familiarity, even if it had become suffocating. But I knew that missing her didn't mean I wanted her back. It was just a part of the process, a part of moving on. One day, about 2 months after she had left, I received a text from her. She had found a small apartment and was settling in. She thanked me for everything and said she was doing better, that she was finally starting to feel like she had a direction in life. She didn't say much else, and I didn't push for more. It was clear that we had both moved on, each in our own way. Life has a funny way of working out sometimes. Looking back, I realized that the relationship had taught me a lot, about myself, about what I want in a partner, and about the importance of communication. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm ready to face it head on, with a clearer understanding of who I am and what I want. As time went on, I started to open myself up to the possibility of meeting someone new. I wasn't actively looking, but I wasn't closed off to the idea either. I found myself drawn to people who shared my interests, who had passions and goals that aligned with mine. It was a slow process, but I was patient, knowing that the right person would come along when the time was right. One day, during one of my hikes, I met someone who caught my interest. She was part of the group, and we ended up walking together for most of the trail. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our career aspirations, and I felt an instant connection. It was different from what I had felt with my ex, lighter, more effortless. We exchanged numbers at the end of the hike, and over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other more frequently. It was refreshing to be with someone who had a clear sense of who she was and what she wanted. She was ambitious, driven, and had a zest for life that I found infectious. Our relationship started off slowly, both of us taking the time to get to know each other without rushing into anything. But as time went on, I found myself looking forward to our time together more and more. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. It wasn't just about being with someone new, it was about being with someone who complemented my life rather than complicating it. I knew that this relationship was different, that it had the potential to be something lasting. As I sit here, reflecting on everything that has happened, I realize that the end of one chapter often marks the beginning of another. My relationship with my ex may have ended, but it taught me valuable lessons about love, patience, and the importance of finding someone who shares your values and goals. I don't harbor any ill will towards her. In fact, I hope she finds happiness in whatever path she chooses. We were two people who came together at a time when we both needed something, and for a while, it worked. But in the end, we grew apart, and that's okay. It's a part of life, a part of growing up. Now, as I look forward to the future, I feel a sense of peace that I haven't felt in years. The uncertainty that once filled me with dread now feels like an opportunity, a chance to start over, to build something new, something better. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been worth it. And as I move forward, I carry with me the lessons I've learned, the memories I've made, and the hope that the best is yet to come. Our relationship blossomed slowly, but surely, over those early months of dating. There was something different about her, something that set her apart from anyone I'd been with before. She was independent, confident, and completely unafraid to be herself. It was refreshing and intimidating at the same time. We spent our weekends exploring new hiking trails, trying out new restaurants, and just enjoying each other's company. It was easy, so much easier than anything I had experienced before. There were no unspoken resentments or silent frustrations. We communicated openly, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment, and that made all the difference. As the seasons changed, so did our relationship. What started as casual dates and long conversations turned into something deeper, something more meaningful. I found myself thinking about her more and more, looking forward to our next adventure together. She challenged me in ways I hadn't been challenged before, pushing me to be better, to do better. And I did the same for her. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of her apartment watching the sunset, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about the future? Like, where we're headed?" The question caught me off guard, but I appreciated her directness. It was something I had been thinking about too, but hadn't yet found the right moment to bring up. "Yeah," I admitted, "I do. I think about it a lot, actually. And I like where we're headed." She smiled, and there was a warmth in her eyes that made my heart skip a beat. "Me too," she said softly. "I just didn't want to assume anything." "I'm glad you asked," I replied, taking her hand in mine. "Because I see a future with you. I see us building something together, something real." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just enjoying the weight of the conversation. It wasn't heavy or burdensome, it felt right, like we were both on the same page, moving at the same pace towards something that could last. Our lives began to intertwine more and more. We started spending nearly all our free time together, and it became clear that this relationship was different, special. There was a sense of ease between us, a natural rhythm that we both fell into without even trying. It was like we had been meant to find each other, and now that we had, everything just made sense. As we continued to grow closer, our conversations became more serious, touching on topics like family, long-term goals, and even where we might live in the future. It was during one of these conversations that we decided to take a big step together, moving in. We found a cozy little apartment in a part of town we both loved. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was ours. Moving in together was a milestone for both of us, and it felt like the natural next step in our relationship. We spent weeks decorating, making the space our own, and settling into our new life together. Living together only strengthened our bond. We found joy in the little things, cooking dinner together, binge-watching our favorite shows, or just sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, talking about our day. It wasn't always perfect, of course. We had our disagreements, our moments of frustration, but we always worked through them. Communication was key, and we both made a conscious effort to ensure that we never let small issues fester into bigger problems. Our friends and family started noticing how happy we were. My co-workers, who had seen me go through some tough times, commented on how different I seemed, more relaxed, more content. Her friends, too, remarked on how well we complemented each other, how natural we seemed as a couple. It was clear to everyone around us that this relationship was built to last. One evening, after a particularly long and stressful week at work, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, and a warm smile on her face. "I have a surprise for you," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh yeah? What is it?" She stood up and took my hand, leading me into the kitchen where a small envelope sat on the counter. "Open it," she urged, practically bouncing on her toes with anticipation. I picked up the envelope, curious, and carefully opened it. Inside was a pair of plane tickets to a destination I had always dreamed of visiting, Japan. "We're going on a trip," she announced, beaming. "I know you've always wanted to go, and I thought it would be the perfect way to celebrate us." I was speechless, overwhelmed by her thoughtfulness. "I can't believe you did this," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "This is amazing." "You're amazing," she laughed, hugging me back. "I just wanted to do something special for you, for us. We deserve it." The trip to Japan was everything I had hoped for and more. We spent 2 weeks exploring the country, from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the serene temples of Kyoto. We immersed ourselves in the culture, tried new foods, and created memories that would last a lifetime. It was during this trip that I realized just how deeply I had fallen in love with her. One night, as we walked through a quiet park in Kyoto, the cherry blossoms in full bloom around us, I stopped and turned to her. "I love you," I said, the words spilling out before I even had a chance to think about them. She looked up at me, surprised at first, but then a smile spread across her face. "I love you too," she replied, her voice soft but full of emotion. In that moment, under the canopy of cherry blossoms, I knew that this was it. This was the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying, but more than anything, it felt right. When we returned home from Japan, our relationship continued to flourish. We started talking more seriously about our future, about marriage, about building a life together. We were both on the same page, both ready to take that next step when the time was right. A few months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I took her to the park where we had our first date. It was a special place for both of us, filled with memories of the early days of our relationship. As we walked along the path, the leaves crunching under our feet, I felt a nervous excitement building inside me. When we reached the spot where we had first met, I stopped and turned to her. Taking a deep breath, I pulled a small box out of my pocket and got down on one knee. "I've been waiting for the right moment to do this," I began, my heart pounding in my chest. "I knew from the moment we met that there was something special about you, something that made me believe in love again. You've brought so much joy into my life, and I can't imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded, a radiant smile lighting up her face. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." As I slipped the ring onto her finger, a wave of happiness washed over me. It felt like everything had finally fallen into place, like all the struggles and heartache of the past had led me to this moment, to this person. Our engagement was a whirlwind of celebrations and planning. We were surrounded by love and support from our friends and family, all of whom were thrilled for us. The wedding itself was a beautiful, intimate affair, held in a small garden surrounded by close friends and family. As we exchanged our vows, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. The years that followed were filled with growth, both as individuals and as a couple. We continued to support each other in our careers, our hobbies, and our dreams. We traveled, explored new places, and created a life that was full of love, laughter, and adventure. We bought a house, started a family, and built a home that was warm and welcoming. Through it all, we faced our challenges together, never losing sight of the love that had brought us together in the first place. There were tough times, of course, moments of doubt, of fear, of uncertainty, but we always found our way back to each other. We had built a foundation of trust, respect, and deep love, and that carried us through even the most difficult times. Looking back on everything, I realize how much I've grown since that first relationship that left me feeling lost and trapped. It taught me so many valuable lessons, about what I want in a partner, about the importance of communication, and about the kind of life I want to build. But most importantly, it led me to the person I was meant to be with, the person who would become my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. As I sit here now, reflecting on the journey that brought us here, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the love found, and for the life we've built together. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth it, every single moment. And as we look to the future, I'm filled with excitement for all the adventures that still lie ahead, knowing that whatever comes our way, we'll face it together, hand in hand.